Over the past couple of days, I've done reactions to First Take videos. This conversation that happened, I had to get. It was a 25-minute one where they were being very honest and transparent, in my opinion, Brian Windhorst and Stephen A. Smith, on the media and how it is covered, including social media. And this stemmed from LeBron James retweeting something from Kevin Durant's manager, where he expressed his frustration with national media having such big platforms, and what he said was focusing on too much negativity rather than the game of basketball. Then he brought up the podcast LeBron and JJ Redick were doing, where their focus was just strictly the game itself, breaking down plays, what they like strategically. That is something I'm very into as well. I have multiple videos where I break down plays that I see from my own perspective. And the conflict and things that go on within the NBA that is quote unquote negative, it is a part of the story. So I feel if you're being honest, you do got to talk about it. But to a certain extent, that is, Stephen A. and Brian Windhorst really had a spirited dialogue about all of this. They definitely peeled the layers back. Again, it was 25 minutes. I can't play every single thing. I am on YouTube. However, I'm going to try to get most of it. And let's get into this now.
There's a lot of weak ass people on social media. There's a lot of people that hide behind social media to spew and to spread and disseminate their venom. Point taken with both Rich Kleiman and himself. They are not wrong. They're just not complete. I would remind, and Wendy, I will say this to you. Last time I checked, there's former players that's in the media. There's former players that have their own podcasts. There's former players that are on shows like this and various other shows. And so when people talk about the national media, that annoys me. And I think that Rich Kleiman was incomplete with what he said. The fact of the matter is that you listen to him, you listen to what he said, you listen to LeBron and what he intimated, and there's this impression that it's the media, the media, the media. There's several layers to all of this that's not being told. Number one, what's your definition of negativity? If you shoot 2 for 20 and somebody said you played like hot garbage last night, is that negative? Was that factual? Because to me, it's only negative if you continue with that narrative as opposed to neglecting to point out the positive when they perform in a very positive fashion.
Stephen A. is right to point out there's obviously players doing media now. The Draymond Green show, specifically on YouTube, Gilbert Arenas, and even sticking to Gilbert now, a lot of times when I see the topics and conversations they have, it's very, I'll say, unique to say the least, but it's something that if you watch it, you could get passionate about. It's exciting, riveting, whatever word you want to use. It's definitely not a boring conversation. It's a barbershop style, kind of like First Take, and maybe that's where a little frustration comes in from a Stephen A. Smith, because he's looking at maybe something like that, or what other players have done, Jeff Teague, and he's saying, wait a minute, I'm not the only one who is taking this approach when it comes to how they use their platform. The other point I want to get into, when he talks about, yeah, if you shoot 2 for 10 or 2 for 20, what else am I supposed to say? That's a bad game, you played like hot garbage. I think where, from the NBA player standpoint, is, it's one thing to critique somebody if they have a bad game, it's also how you do it. So if you constantly rely on phrases such as he played like hot garbage, he played super trash in order to describe a player's game, it may come across as if, oh, you have to rely on this kind of verbiage in order to gain the engagement and content that you want, rather than actually breaking the game down and explaining why did he have this kind of bad game? What did he do in the offensive scheme that went wrong? What did the other team do defensively that was right? I'm not just putting this all on Stephen A., by the way. This is not specifically aimed towards him. I'm just observing what I see from the reaction when players hear that kind of commentary as a whole within the media. And then the second thing that comes into that, tying into it, is they may look at it like, well, if you're critiquing us this harshly, who are you? You never played in the NBA. You never did what we did at a professional level. There has to be a certain level of respect and decorum when you're commentating on what we're doing.
I can speak on behalf of myself and many people in the national media. There's a strong reluctance to touch on people's personal affairs. That's your business. Talking about the game and talking about what impacts the game and your performance is not getting into your personal life.
Ronnie's had social media blackouts a handful of times over the years when he would openly admit that he used to sit there during the finals and read social media. I do think the NBA could benefit from more storytelling like Rich is talking about here. But I also think that shows like this one help drive interest in the NBA. I just think we're a little out of balance. I have colleagues who are, cover NBA teams, and over the course of an NBA season, they will post 1,000 pieces of content that illustrate how much everything, written content, interviews, videos, and they will have one piece of content where a player makes a mistake get 12 million views.
Yeah.
And something that took a lot of work and nuance and storytelling might get literally 1/1000th of that.
A few things to point out here. I had to show how adamant Stephen A was about not getting into people's personal lives, strictly keeping this about the game of basketball. It's something that he's echoed over the years. It was only fair for me to show that once again. Number two, it also kind of ties into LeBron James reading a lot of social media and obviously seeing people online who are not just going to strictly talk about basketball. They will take it to a personal level. Attacks on who you are as a person that has nothing to do with what you're doing on the court, mentioning family. We see all these kind of things. But what Brian Windhorst said that really needs to be highlighted is the person out there who's making, let's say, wholesome content that takes a lot of dedication, time, and effort. Make sure you get the facts straight to really make the compelling story that you're trying to convey, and then you make something else that may not take as much time. You're pointing out a mistake or flaw, whatever, and that gets way more traction and engagement. And to be honest, that's where it falls on y'all, the listener, the people who are consuming the content. You are literally the standard as to what is hot or what is not. And this is a conversation that is not just for NBA fans. It's on a macro level. You could talk about the news, society in general. If it bleeds, it leads. You've heard that phrase before when it comes to the media. So it's just really the reality of the world that we live in.
I also see players on benches, absolutely make fun of players who get dunked on or crossed over. Like, yes, a million fans are going to react to that, but the players on the sideline react to it too. When I came into the league, when a guy got crossed over, people didn't fall on the floor on the bench. It's a part of what's going on in society right now. I think we could all benefit as people who follow the NBA and in the NBA if we did go back to focusing on more storytelling.
Dwight Howard, talking about that, these folks are just talking this smack and all of this other stuff. And you know what? He said, Stephen, you know the truth. You got to correct the record. And I was like, I am. No problem. He said, you could quote me. I'm not hiding. That's the only reason I'm telling the story, because I'm not violating his trust. And I remember saying, what's the big deal? How come this can't wait till tomorrow or whatever? He was like, they're messing with my brand. There are bigger issues and stories that need to be told. Wendy, you just pointed out, definitely stories needed to be told, but they want to dictate who tells it.
This is where the debate really picked up. It became apparent what each individual was standing for. On Brian Windhorst's side, he said they've gone away from the storytelling, which is why he brought up the fact that the negative story, the mistake the player made, will get more views than the actual story that takes more time, dedication. But he was alluding to the quality of it being better, and since they've gone away from it, it is doing a disservice to the NBA. Stephen A, in response, is saying, well, wait a minute, it's harder for us to even tell that story because the players have become very sensitive and they have brands to protect. To Stephen A's point, specifically about Brandon, that is why you have old school players from the past as well as NBA fans right now who will point out, hey, sometimes it looks like some of these guys are more into the Brandon aspect rather than caring more about their play on the court. That is a perspective that's out there.
I would argue, and maybe he would be able to say differently, he knows the figures, I don't. I would argue the most successful product that Uninterrupted has put out is The Shop, which is,
I agree with that.
Frankly, a show that is not too different from this show. Even players who have their own media companies, who have control, Stephen A, they realize that sometimes, shows like this are what people want.
When Kleiman brought up JJ and LeBron, okay, that's fine. Y'all were talking pure basketball. We appreciate that. And basketball junkies should appreciate that. Excellent podcast with the both of them. You learn so much. Both of them are basketball savants as far as I'm concerned. But the world doesn't consist of savants. And the world ain't always interested in listening to savants be savants all the damn time. Sometimes they want stuff normalized. They want it to a degree where even though you're dissecting it with a fine-tooth comb and you're showing the world that you know what most don't, in the end, at some point in time, there's a bottom line factor that comes into the equation.
What Brian Windhorst said reiterated my earlier point about shows like a Gilbert Arenas, Jeff Teague, the approach that they take. It is similar to a First Take. To end things off right here, and this is the part I really wanted to get into, I disagree with the part where Stephen A said not everyone wants to see savants be savants. I'm not saying I know as much as LeBron James, JJ Redick, or even the average NBA player. even the player at the end of the bench. We could go as far as that. But I think if you watch the game of basketball, anything for that matter, you study it, observe it, you appreciate it, you could understand when somebody to that magnitude is explaining what's going on. For me, when I watched that JJ Redick podcast with LeBron, I understood what they were saying. It wasn't like I was lost, and I don't know as much as them. And as I mentioned before, I do video breakdowns showing teams offensively what they did on this play, defensively what they did on that play here, there. It may not get as much views all the time as maybe other videos, but I do it because, yeah, I'm that basketball junkie who knows there's others out there like me that love breaking down film. Anyways, I'm going to leave things right there. Hit me up in the comment section with what you thought about Stephen A. Smith, Brian Windhorst, the whole conversation revolving content, the way it's done. I want to hear a lot of perspectives. I know you got opinions on this. Let me know. Like, share, and subscribe. And as always, salute for listening. Peace.